Welcome to SDGs Promise Japan's first seminar series, Global Health in the Age of COVID-19, Infectious Disease and Human Security. My name is Yuma Ishii, and I'm an MD PhD candidate at the Tokyo Medical and Dental University. I am also an associate at SDGs Promise Japan, and I will be your MC today. We have an exciting discussion today, and I'd like to ask Ms. Suzuki to start us off with her opening remarks.
Thank you for the introduction. And thank you, President Bradley and President Kitaoka, for joining us today. Over the past decade, SDGs Promise Japan has worked across reducing poverty and ensuring human security. In this new COVID-19 era, a strong response for global health and health system strengthening is necessary to achieve SDGs and peace and prosperity worldwide. Through this online seminar, we invite multidisciplinary experts such as President Bradley and President Kitaoka to share their insight on these topics, as well as their advice on how we can live with COVID-19. Thank you again for joining us today, and I hope you will enjoy this seminar.
Thank you, Ms. Suzuki. Without further ado, please let me introduce our speakers for our first seminar. Prior to becoming the 11th president of Vassar College, President Bradley was the director of the Brady Johnson Program in Grand Strategy at Yale, as well as the head of Brantford College. She is also the founder and former faculty director of the Yale Global Health Leadership Institute, which operates education and research programs in China, the United Kingdom, Ethiopia, Ghana, Liberia, Rwanda, and South Africa, through which President Bradley directed projects to improve and enhance Ethiopia's healthcare system, hospital management, and availability of primary care. Before assuming his current post as president of JICA, President Kitaoka was president of the International University of Japan. His career includes being the professor of National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies, the professor of graduate schools for law and politics at the University of Tokyo, where he is now an emeritus professor, and the deputy permanent representative of Japan to the United Nations. He has served as deputy chairman of the Council on Security and Defense Capabilities and chairman of the Council on the Development of Long-Term Strategy as a growth strategy based on the Paris Agreement. Over the years, he has received many honors and awards, including the Medal with Purple Ribbon for his academic achievements, and has written numerous books and articles on modern Japanese politics and diplomacy. Today, we will learn about their careers in the fields of national security and global health, their insight and advice on diplomacy and pandemic preparedness, and what they believe is necessary to rear next generation leaders in the era of COVID-19. Welcome again, President Bradley and President Kitaoka. Thank you for joining us today. Perhaps we can kick this discussion off with President Bradley, looking back on your career, how you've been involved in international cooperation, and what your role is in this field today.
First, let me begin by thanking our wonderful hosts. Dr. Kitaoka, I am very honored to be here with you. Thank you so much, and I am very admiring of all that you've accomplished in your career. And Ms. Suzuki, this initiative through the SPJ is so important. Even as it is starting small, it is already doing wonderful things. So I very much appreciate being here with you. And Yuma, so nice to see you again, having met a year ago. And thanks for putting this whole thing together. So I appreciate it. You asked me about looking back at my career, how has it really involved international cooperation and how does that help us in the area of global health and security? I would probably start with a couple of really key insights I feel that I've gleaned after 30 years of this kind of a career, and I'll be very interested to hear Dr. Kataoka's views on this as well. But first, much of my work has been involved with either international agencies like the World Health Organization or the World Bank, or has been directly in a country with the Ministry of Health, often related to programming that was really designed inside the country, not internationally cooperative, but inside the country. And I think I've learned a lot from those two interactions. One, when one works at the global level with international agencies that are multilateral, like the WHO or the World Bank, the potential for transformational change is enormous. But we so often fall short of that transformational potential, largely because the underlying trust of countries making up that multinational agency is not strong. Often there is trust between a bilateral agreement, but less trust multilaterally. And this, for me, is one of my great sadnesses, actually, over a 30-year career of where we sit right now, and particularly the United States is in a very tough spot in terms of its really support for multilateral agencies, a spot that I think many public health people are not supportive of, that we really should be more engaged and more collaborative in that multinational space. The second domain that I've worked a lot in is with countries themselves. So you mentioned Ethiopia. I've done this in Ghana. I worked in Rwanda. We're still working there in ways in which the government itself has got a strategic plan. They have a political platform. They know what they want to achieve and are ready to lead, but often have needed technical support. And I know Japan gives much of this in many of its efforts overseas as well. Yale and Vassar have both done a lot of this work, and that has been extremely gratifying to work with. When I was in Ethiopia, I worked with Dr. Tedros, who is now the head of the WHO, and I worked with him very closely for a decade, and he had tremendous leadership and political savvy. What he needed was ideas from the outside and technical support. And in that way, I think the United States and our work has been very, very successful. And I feel very proud of that work. And it stands in contrast to the work done, I think, in a multilateral environment, which I hope will shift over time. I might just end this brief part of this with bringing us up to date now. At Vassar, which is a liberal arts college in New York, it has undergraduate students. We do have multiple international collaborations. One of our strongest is with Rwanda, where we work at the University of Global Health Equity to teach students there. And they are, right out of high school, just starting medical education. We teach them liberal arts like history, writing, critical thinking, research. And that's a very exciting collaboration between Vassar and the University of Global Health Equity. We also have a nice collaboration with Ochanomizu in Japan, where I visited this year, which is just a wonderful college and university to work with. And that has been going on nearly a decade now. And we send students there, they send students to Vassar, and it's really you talked about diplomacy, it's really a moment where students aren't just studying global health, but they're studying everything, all kinds of things. And what they're really learning is empathy and understanding and diplomacy between the countries, which I think is at the heart of trust and is at the heart of making our multilateral efforts more effective in the world. So thank you.
Thank you, President Bradley. President Kitaoka, may we ask for your perspective and experiences?
Yeah, thank you very much. And then first of all, I'm very happy to discuss this very interesting topic with the President of Vassar College. Because, I'm originally a historian and I know something about Meiji history. And then when Japan started the real modernization effort in 1868, within only 3 years, Japan sent a big delegation to the United States and to Europe to learn what is the real modern Western civilization was. And then they brought several very young girls, and one of them was accepted in Vassar College, and she was educated very effectively. And she came back to Japan and got married with a very famous army general, and who later on promoted to prince. That's why I hear just from you that she's called as princess in your college.
We're very proud of her.
About myself, my real specialization has been the modern Japanese political and diplomatic history. But I also began my research on the contemporary international politics. And in that capacity, I was asked to be in the council to give advice to the prime ministers and foreign ministers, starting from 1992, so many years ago. So then I was very young. But since then, I have been in those kind of councils to most of the foreign ministers and prime ministers. And then in 2004, I was asked to go to the United Nations as an ambassador, and then I just got into the world of diplomacy from scholar to a practitioner. Then I found that many of the scholars, many of those countries are still developing countries, and then in order to give the advice to them, my real background, modern Japanese experience, is very useful. And then I got very much interested in providing my knowledge about Japan's own experience of modernization to those people. And then while I'm working on the many issues on peacekeeping or poverty reduction and so forth, we became very close to Jeffrey Sachs. And then after coming back to Japan, we established together with my wife here the small NGO. This is how I came here. And then I again came back to the campus, and after spending some years, I was then asked to be the leader of JICA, Japan International Cooperation Agency. For those people who do not know much about Japan's ODA or JICA, let me use a few minutes to speak about JICA. Japan was the biggest donor in the 1990s. Now, because of economic stagnation, Japan is now number 4 after US, UK, Germany, and together we are about the same level with France. Anyhow, Japan has been very serious in providing official development assistance since 1950s, before we became accepted in OECD. So it's very unusual to start ODA before becoming an OECD member. And then our focus was originally Southeast Asia, and East Asia, Southeast Asia, and South Asia. And then the result is very clear. At that time, the Southeast Asian countries are still very poor, roughly about as poor as sub-Saharan countries. Now, as you know, they have developed quite a lot, and then we can be proud of our cooperation. Certainly, the development was because of their hard working and their ideas and the government of the people. But at the same time, I'm sure that our cooperation could contribute to some extent. And then this is how I became to be involved. Still, I think that my background the specialist of Japan's modernization is very useful. And then that's how I'm involved, and that's how I'm leading my organization.
Thank you for sharing your experiences, President Kitaoka. Now I'd like to ask about your current positions. President Bradley, I learned that Vassar College will be reopening next month. But how did you respond to COVID-19, and what challenges are you currently working on?
Yes. Well, thank you so much. This is an issue that has taken hours and hours and hours of planning, collaboration, system redesign, educational classes redesign to really try to adapt. I guess I wanted to step back a little bit. When COVID first became apparent in January, I really do believe that many public health people in the United States believed that because we had good pandemic preparedness over the last decades, like the way we responded to SARS, for instance, and the way we responded to Zika, really even the way we responded to Ebola, we had excellent systems in place. Our CDC, our FDA, what we call Health and Human Services were collaborative, knew their stuff, experienced, supported by the the executive branch of government. I think because of that, we were lulled into a false sense of security, that we had what was needed. Then as February came around and March came around, it was clear that the virus was not really contained in any way, and that the community spread was extensive, and that we might still be okay if we could really ramp up testing very, very fast. And the United States has a lot of resources. That's not crazy to think we could have done that. However, I think that, again, our current situation in our government and our current sort of lack of preparedness, that the emergency preparedness team actually, which President Obama had put in place, had been disassembled early in this administration. And then the experience level of the CDC, FDA, and HHS were more limited. They weren't the same people, et cetera. And I think even at the local level, public health people were kind of waiting for federal advice and activity to move on. So we missed the opportunity, I think, to contain, even after we knew there was community spread. I think there was an opportunity for high-scale testing. Today, although the original sort of epidemic in the United States, pandemic in the United States, really hit exactly where we are. I mean, we are 45 minutes from the epicenter in Westchester County of where the pandemic hit worst in the United States. That was back in March and April. Today, the state I live in, New York, very much has contained the virus. And in my county, which has 300,000 people, we test more than 1,000 people a day, and usually 5 to 7, 10 people are positive. I think yesterday only 2 were in the hospital. You know, it's very, very contained where we are. But as we all know, the United States is very large, geographically, population-wise, and incredibly diverse and fragmented. And as a result, in other parts of the country, many, many other states, pretty much everywhere except the Northeast corridor, the pandemic is raging. And reproductive numbers very high, over 2.0. And really an extremely scary time. So what does Vassar College do in the midst of this? Because actually around us is quite contained, but we draw students from all over the world, Japan, of course, but all over the world and all over the country. So we have been planning for, now it's been 12 weeks straight, planning for a method by which we could have classes in person and also remote. This means that every student can select whether they want to live at home and take our classes on Zoom like we are now, or whether they want to come to campus and take classes in person. Our faculty are a blended faculty. Some will teach remotely and some will teach in person, depending on how they feel. That's their choice. And we expect that our employees, we've set up a nice telework program, so probably half of our employees can work from home rather than from on campus. The things that we're working on very, very hard right now are twofold. One is, as we bring students back, we want to be sure we limit influx. In other words, COVID coming from out there onto campus. That's job one. We have to limit that. So we are requiring every student to have a negative COVID test within 7 days before they arrive. And then we're testing them in their very first days here. Our response time, is supposed to be 1 or 2 days with that test response time once they're on campus. And they'll be quarantined until that's negative. And then we will have the campus as a whole. Students cannot leave the campus. We want to be the New Zealand of higher education, where you can create an island and you don't have very much back and forth. Our employees, of course, do come back and forth, but many of them will telework and they will be masked. You have to have a mask on campus all the time, and they will keep social distance. Almost every room on campus has now been assigned by how many people can be in that room and still be 6 feet apart. So as you walk into New England 105, you'll realize 15 people is the maximum here. And we also, of course, have done what I think so many countries have done to put up plexiglass barriers and things on the floor, so you're orchestrating or choreographing where people can move. A lot of one-way movement now instead of back and forth. More cleaning staff, a lot of cultural work. You heard me before talk about trust, and that's true inside a college too, not just between countries. So we're working very hard on community care standards. Everybody signs a pledge that they promise to uphold the standards, and we're developing a kind of community accountability. And I don't know, I'll be curious what you all think of this, but where all people in the college feel empowered to remind someone, hey, you forgot your mask, or you're standing too close. And the person who is reminded is obligated to say, oh, thank you for reminding me. So that there's no kind of gotcha, but more we are as a community working on keeping each other healthy. I'll just end with, we think every day about, should we do this or should we go fully remote? And we still have the opportunity to go fully remote, and we're in touch with our local public health officials daily on this question. But we also know that this virus is here to stay, and after this virus there will be others, and that learning how to have human interaction in a safe way with universal precautions is critical. So, we're still looking at the timing, but I think it's an opportunity for Americans in colleges like Vassar to learn interconnectedness, how we work with each other to uphold each other's health. And this is a value system that I think Americans can really benefit from. So I'm very excited in a sense of having 2,000 young adults, and that's what we're really learning. Because if they can take that value out to their future life, heck, maybe they'll get good at taking much more complicated problems on, even the racism we face, the social inequities we face. All of that stems from a root of not understanding we're all in it together. We are interdependent. And I think we have a real opportunity to develop that capacity, and I hope we'll do that.
Thank you, President Bradley. President Kitaoka, with the size of JICA and the number of countries you operate in, how has it been responding to COVID-19? And what are some next steps that JICA will take in combating this disease?
Yes, and then also let me start with the state of Japan, just to correspond to the explanation of President Bradley. Then, frankly speaking, Japan's response to the COVID-19 was a little bit late because of the two reasons. One is that Japan was still wishing to have Olympic Games this year. So that's why it was rather late to decide to take to the next steps. And then another reason was, when it comes to, we have a custom of having face masks and others, but the supply chain is very much depending on China. We could not get those kind of masks and protective clothes because they are produced in China where they need them very much. So at the very beginning, there was some confusion in Japan, but the Japanese government started to appeal to the people to be very attentive at the end of March or early April. But Japan's characteristics was that the Japanese government did not take strong measure. They just appealed to the people and to avoid the meeting with too many people or to take the distance with other people, something like that. But still, it worked because the Japanese people, they paid their attention to other people, and then they wanted to avoid to be the source of trouble to other people. Then it calmed down. Then toward the mid-May, and then the Japanese government just started to open the society. And then again, there's another wave is coming now. But still, the total number of the newly infected people is, roughly speaking, 1,000 a day, on which Japanese people are very much concerned. But still, the total number of the deaths until today is a total number, 1,000. Japan's population is 40% of the United States. Still, 1,000. This is, we can safely say that this is very low in number.
Yes.
Okay, then let's next go to what we are doing as JICA in foreign countries. We have roughly 100 offices overseas. Then, but we have to withdraw many of them because, they are located in countries where the good hospital is not available. And also the transportation is very difficult. That's why we withdraw many of them. In that sense, JICA's assistance was also a little bit delayed. But we are starting new initiative right now. We have, long tradition of assisting those people in this area of health and medicine. But our focus has been in prevention rather than curing. We believe that the prevention is more important and more effective. Starting from, providing clean water, and then providing, teaching the kids how to please wash your hands. For example, JICA has built 200 elementary schools in Egypt by the request of Egyptian president and on the Japanese model. And then their custom starts with washing their hands when they arrive at the school. And also they are requested to clean up their floor together by themselves. So this is how we introduce and then ask them to have a custom of washing their hands to make the things clean around you. And also our one thing we are doing very much is providing mother-child health care book, which is a small book. In Japan, we provide this to the woman when she is found as pregnant. Then she writes in all the important records. When she found pregnant, what kind of shots, how heavy was the baby when he or she was born, and also what kind of shots were given to him or her. And then this is a very important source included here. So this is also important. Also, we have been supporting the agriculture and also how to teach them on nutrition. And then well-balanced nutrition is very important. Years ago, we tend to focus on how to prevent hunger. But providing food is not enough. Providing good food with good nutrition is important. So over and all, our focus has been on prevention. So based on this tradition, we are providing and we are starting new initiative, which I might be able to call Global Initiative for Health and Medicine, in which I am planning to do many kind of things together, organize those kind of things, and then the core should be building hospitals. Actually, JICA has established in the past 30, 40 hospitals in the world. The new one was in Mongolia, which was completed last year. Another things were, actually we have a long tradition. The first one was by the Japanese in foreign country was in Taiwan. When the Taiwan was a colony of Japan, it was in 1890s, which was very effective. And also in Thailand, in Manchuria, when it was a part of Japan's colony, and which was also very effective. Well, of course, I'm against colonialism, but still there are some good policies even among colonialism. And then based on this tradition, we have, built a new, very good hospital in Beijing in 1984, which is still working, one of the leading hospitals in Beijing. And recently we have established, as I said, in Mongolia, and we have been supporting the hospitals in Vietnam. It was started when it was South Vietnam, and then turned to the Vietnam, today's Vietnam, still working beyond the differences of the regime. Also, last year, 2 years ago, I visited the hospital attached to the medical school of Indonesia University, which is also doing very well. So based on this experience, in Africa, we have some couple of good institutions like Noguchi Institute in Ghana, which is named after Noguchi Hideo, a very famous medical scientist in the 1920s. And also in Kenya, we have a very good collaboration with the Kenyan government. So based on this tradition, we are trying to expand and also to cover other policies in preparation and others. And I'm willing to call it, global initiative. And I'd like to appeal to other democratic countries. Let's do this together. To France, why don't you do this in Senegal or Cote d'Ivoire or Morocco, and things like that. So this is our new stage. So we have to wait for the decision for the budget from the government. In probably this is to be decided in the end of this year. So I'm just planning, waiting for their favorable decision on this budget.
Wow. May I comment on that for one moment?
Of course.
That is so exciting. I think your vision is tremendous. I've been to Noguchi.
Actually, when Dr. Noguchi visited Ghana, it was in the 1920s. When I first visited Ghana and visited this institute, and I saw the pictures of that time,
yeah,
it was so poor. Yeah. There's nothing at all. Yeah. And then it was just 10 years after Dr. Schweitzer.
Yeah.
In that sense, we have a long tradition of assisting the people in Africa.
Noguchi is just wonderful. We did a lot of mental health research with the University of Ghana through the Noguchi Institute. And then I haven't been to Kenya, but the hospital focus is very interesting. That's really what Ethiopia did with Yale and the Clinton Foundation and the Gates Foundation, trying to build hospitals and really think about the inside of the hospital. How do you manage it? Not just the bricks and mortar, but how do you run a good hospital? So I congratulate you on a very exciting vision.
Well, one thing I can add is that we have very unique approach, which is a project for a clean hospital. You know, in Africa, sometimes the hospitals are not very clean, which is very bad. Therefore, we are trying to match effort to clean up the hospitals, which is relatively cheap, you know.
Yes, it's a great blessing. And it's all about the systems, really, which Japan has innovated for decades and decades and decades. Nice.
Thank you very much, President Bradley and President Kitaoka. In these times, the U.S. and Japan, as developed nations, may be expected to support the rest of the world, but this may be a little bit more difficult than usual. What types of approaches and philosophies should we consider our nations, or maybe our nations consider, to promote international cooperation? President Bradley, you mentioned interconnectedness and interdependentness, but may we hear a little bit more on this topic?
Yeah. Well, it's really a complicated topic, Julian. And I think many people have written about this. It's very complicated in a large democracy where the government changes regularly and where the public decides who's going to be their leader, and the public changes their ideas quickly also. And with social media and sort of the democratization of information, suddenly the model of democracy becomes even more pluralistic, which can be wonderful and can promote equity, but also creates fragmentation and complexity, where a country like the United States might be going down one path for a decade very happily, and then suddenly new regime, new approach, and whole different path. And I think that makes the United States quite complicated to be a partner in these multinational and multilateral collaborations. Right now, and the United States has ebbed and flowed. We have a historian here who could probably tell the story better than a public health expert, but the United States has ebbed and flowed in how it has been more isolationist and more globalist. And that really has gone back and forth since, the beginning of the founding of the United States. And we've had decades and decades of intense isolationism. But we've also had tremendous expansion and thinking and collaboration globally as well. I think right now the United States is in unpredictable spot. Very unpredictable. We're about to have elections. We're in the middle of a COVID pandemic. We don't even know how the elections are going to really happen. We're going to do it by mail or in person. People are not as prepared as they need to be. And so much rides on that for how our country will engage globally. My thought and prayer really is that whatever shall come is one that really takes a longer term perspective on global interaction. One that looks at each country for what its comparative advantage is. What is that country good at? And how does that fit with a global sense of what our priorities are as a globe? To me, it's always interesting that we have the ability to give information now so quickly across the globe. So you would think that would help us collaborate on ways in which we would use our comparative advantages to help the whole globe. But what we don't have is a global governance system. And the UN, of course, I'm eager to hear your experiences, deep experiences with the UN. but right now, Americans, relationship with the UN is very tenuous, and that saddens me greatly as an academic and someone who has studied the impact of the United Nations. I actually recently published a book with colleagues on if we could go back to Woodrow Wilson's time of the 14 points for sort of how the globe might work together, and we had to rewrite those now. What would we rewrite? And the chapter that I was responsible for was discussing a global governance strategy for global health specifically, because global health was not in Wilson's 14 points at all. But how to really establish a multinational priority setting process that has some teeth to hold countries to it. I think the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, are really the guiding light there, but trying to figure out how to stay on that path when we have some very wealthy countries, the United States included, not always as committed to a stable strategy over decades to allow something like that to occur. So I'm afraid I haven't got any silver bullet answer, but maybe a lot more cautions and questions and understanding of why we are where we are. And I think looking to countries for leadership from a informed global perspective, that's critical. We have to have the right leadership capacities, people, systems in place, and I'm not sure we're there yet.
Thank you, President Bradley. I can't wait to read your book. President Kitaoka, you kindly shared the contributions from JICA, but may we hear more on the basic philosophies and approaches you have and what you envision for Japan?
Well, now let me first provide some comments to the remarks of President Bradley. I can say that I'm a little more optimistic about the United States because, I cannot say I'm very happy with Dr. President Trump, but still, if he is really leading the United States to compete with China, then you have to have a better cooperation with other democratic countries eventually. So listening to the recent speech by Secretary of State Pompeo, he is just focusing on the importance of the idea, democracy, liberalism, and so forth, versus totalitarianism. So that means that U.S. also has to go back to the basic of democracy, and also U.S. has to be together with other democracies. So I hope that the United States will come back to the a little more to the direction of international cooperation with the democratic countries. That's one. The other is that there are many, say, foundations like Bill and Melinda Foundation, with which we are, JICA is also doing some project together. We are providing the polio vaccine in Nigeria and also in Pakistan, which are very successful. And also this SPJ is doing something together with the Gates Foundation on neglected tropical disease. Therefore, this is your strength. You have the government is a little bit in not in a very good position, but still you have many other strong private sectors and NGOs. Those two reasons are the why I'm a little bit optimistic about that. On JICA and on Japan, the most important thing is that Japan has been in stagnation for almost 3 decades. After in early 1990s, there was a burst of bubble economy. Since then, Japan's growth is very low, and then how to return to the process of development is a very important goal for Japan's economy. Without that, we cannot get enough budget from the government. That's one thing. Then even if it is done, we can see that more, support from the people. We just issued a bond for ticket bond. We have a Tokyo International Conference on African Development every 3 years, and then the issuing the bond was very successful last year. Therefore, that shows that people's support to ODA is a little bit growing. That's my hope. And also, if only we can provide a good idea, then we can have a good response from the people. That's my optimistic, prediction.
Well, I really appreciate what you said, and it helps me to hear it from outside. I think you're 100% right. Our foundations, the creativity of our private sector, and its, generosity really is remarkable and sustains. And perhaps that will really carry us through this time. But I remain very optimistic about Japan because I think of it as a place that's able to have a top-down strategy when that's what's needed, and be able to say, we're all going to work in this together in a way that I'm envious of. And I think your commitment to development over the decades has been, to have ODA before, the very beginning, that says it all, what the values are. So I'm optimistic for Japan too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Bradley. Thank you very much, President Kitaoka. We have about a little bit less than 15 minutes on the clock, but we have a few questions from students in Japan today. But before this, speaking of the next generation, what skills and abilities will be necessary to realize a society that can promote better cooperation?
Well, number one is, particularly among young adults, we need to develop the skills to be able to work in diverse and really inclusive ways, because the world is very diverse politically, sociologically, racially, age, location, everything. And we need to develop that capacity of empathy for other cultures. That I think is just number one. I would say number two is creativity. We need people who can think outside the box, who have confidence and learn how to be resourceful with what they have to solve a problem in a new way, and have that intellectual freedom to develop something new, because we need new ideas. And I guess, I do have one other that I think is very important, and it's kind of a new skill come back to us. But boy, the ability to communicate. And now it's communicate on social media, communicate the messaging properly. It's so much more powerful than ever before, because a tweet can, change world direction in a way. So I think that's what I would say, the ability to work inclusively across diverse ways, creativity, and the ability to communicate well on all media.
Thank you, President Bradley. How about for Japan, President Kitaoka?
My answer is very short. Any skill will be useful. First of all, for example, my real specialty has been history. History is useful. And also the political science is useful. Economics is useful. Statistics is useful. But on the other hand, you have to be open for other skills. One skill is not enough. Two skills are not enough. Therefore, you have to be driven by your kind of intellectual curiosity. If you have a strong intellectual curiosity, that has driven me to today, then you are very much willing to know the people in other culture, other civilization. Then that will drive you to the world of international cooperation.
Thank you for the wonderful and truly informative discussion, President Kitaoka and President Bradley. We have a few questions from students in Japan interested in global development and health today. Our first question is from Ms. Sato, third-year student at the Tokyo Women's University. what are the advantages of development aid for developed countries? She wonders if there could be an incentive for a nation to provide free cooperation, even though it would improve its status in the international community and increase its humanitarian reputation. Dr. Bradley, may we ask you first?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for asking it. I guess for developed countries, the motivation is multifold, but often, as you have said in your question, it does have a humanitarian underpinning that people feel good about their country when they're doing good across the seas. But I also think the other pieces that are very motivating are trade and establishing friendships and educational collaborations that do lead to better trade. I think peace, you make friends with people, you go to school with people, you are donating and getting involved together, you are just less likely to go to war with each other because you've got that interdependence. And I think that would be the other main motivation. The U.S. has also sometimes been motivated by scientific discovery, that you are donating, but all of a sudden you're learning something new because you've seen it work in India, or you've seen it work in Japan, or you've seen it work in a completely new setting. So I would say those would be the main advantages to a developed country.
Thank you, President Bradley. How about for Japan, President Kitaoka?
This is a very important question, because, there are many people who may ask this kind of question. My answer is very simple. Just think about your country. The rich people are paying more taxes to support the poor people. Okay? And everyone can agree with this one. Then how about the people beyond the border? Do you not have obligation to support the poorer people or the poorest people beyond the border? It is our obligation to support those people. That's why developed countries in OECD have decided to provide 0.7% of GDP for the official development assistance. This is a commitment among the rich countries. Unfortunately, very few countries have fulfilled this obligation, such as the Nordic countries plus UK. Japan is only half of this, and the US is even lower. But still, this idea cannot be denied. If you have to support the poor people in your country, why do you not have to support the poorer countries in poorer people?
Thank you very much. We have about just under 10 minutes, so perhaps one more question. This is from Ms. Kishino, a third-year student from the University of Tokyo. China's policies have come under fire from the international community. How can we ask China to change its stance on international healthcare cooperation? President Bradley, what are your thoughts from an academic perspective?
Thank you again for the question. I think it's incredibly important. I don't think we can talk about global development or global health without having China very much at the table and thinking. So if we look at China needs to grow, expand, has an enormous population that it needs to feed, has tremendous capacity for economic development. And I think we make a mistake when we don't collaborate, when we don't say, well, we've got to find a common ground with a resource, a global resource like that, to not face facts about what that is, I think is very short-sighted. In many ways, when we were working on climate together, a fundamental question for China and the United States and the globe, actually China and the United States during the Obama administration really came to a place of understanding, even though it was going to take sacrifice from all sides. I think we can get back there, but it requires more recognition, especially for the US and China, of each other's strengths and acceptances of that, and working together rather than like one trying to beat the other, because that's just not really the globe that we live in. I don't know that my views are, they're definitely my own as an academic and I guess someone who's taught grand strategy for a long time. When there is a country that needs to, get onto the global stage, it's important to accommodate that and collaborate. So hopefully you're influencing each other to prioritize things like human security, the environment, human rights, etc. Not an easy thing, but something I think we have to face.
Thank you very much. President Kitaoka, may we hear your thoughts on this as well?
I have been contacting with Chinese people, Chinese scholars for many years. I have many friends in China. But actually, the academic freedom speech is becoming smaller and smaller recently. And they are almost suffocated. In China, you cannot see Japanese newspaper. You cannot use Google. Then if you use a number over 64 or 64 or whatever, it is to be deleted immediately because 64 means June 4th, which is the date of the Tiananmen incident. So the government is so much afraid of the people's referring to this number. And also, if there's a picture of Winnie the Pooh, it is to be deleted because this is Winnie the Pooh is quite similar to Xi Jinping. They look like each other. So it is used quite often to criticize Xi Jinping. I don't like this kind of world in which people cannot enjoy the freedom to expand to the world. China is kindly enough to establish the big building in Ethiopia of African Union headquarters. But China provides the money for water, electricity, and also some for human personnel. But all the discussion is tapped, But I don't like this kind of system to expand globally very much. And the one important thing is that while China is trying to provide more support with face masks, protective clothes, at the same time, they are trying to expand in South China Sea, Eastern China Sea, suppressing the freedom in Hong Kong, and also Uyghurs, and then showing a tough position toward India, even to Bhutan. How come this can go together? I really hope that, they can calm down. But it is very difficult for such a country to be changed from outside. China can be changed only from within. Occasionally, we can have some tools. Some kind of peer pressure might work in some areas, such as, one thing I'm very much looking at is the status of Chinese lending. Many countries have accumulated the debt against China. And then actually many countries cannot pay it back to China. In this kind of situation, the advanced countries are accustomed to this situation. We don't like this kind of situation, but we have a system of handling this one by the name of Paris Club, and how to handle this issue. Whether China can join to Paris Club to handle that debt issue of the developed countries. This is a test case of the Chinese goodwill.
Thank you very much. I wish we could go on, but we're almost towards the end of the hour. But may we receive closing comments from both of you? President Bradley, may we start with you?
Yeah, and maybe I'll just start with just a little bit more in the area of China. I really agree with what you've just said. And I think the idea that countries change from within when they are as big and powerful as China is very consistent with the way I see it. That I don't like those systems either, but how to contain it, I think we could make a lot of mistakes by trying to over-contain it from the outside in ways that might be impossible and might have enormous backfires, which I guess will bring me just to my final comment about what we've been talking about, and I started with interconnectedness. I think particularly for the students who are listening, one thing that is, as I've learned through my career and is so important, is to always be thinking of the second and third and fourth order effects of anything you do. So we are interconnected, even though we act like we are not, and we try to do so many individualistic things, but to always, with every action, think, and what will that trigger, and what will that trigger, and then what will happen? Really thinking ahead in an interconnected world will make us much more modest in how we intervene, and I think do less damage, unintended damage, and also allows us to maybe be a little more empathic to those around the globe who are affected by one country's actions many ways down the line. This can be a very positive thing, because you can think, if I come up with an action that triggers positive reinforcement towards something even better, that's very exciting. But it can be the other way too. And I think as young professionals coming of age, thinking about health and medicine globally, always thinking about the second, third, fourth order effects of everything we do is really is paramount to being a good global citizen. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. President Kitaoka, may we receive your closing comments?
Well, when I look at the world as a scholar in international politics, I'm not that optimistic. But still, as a practitioner in a donor agency, I can be optimistic, because the biggest reason is that I'm witnessing many excellent guys willing to come to JICA. Okay, we accept roughly 30 young guys to JICA, plus some 10 guys in their 30s or so. And then there's no one without experience in foreign countries. Everyone has some experience, such as they are born in foreign countries, or they have studied abroad before graduating from the college, or they have they did some internship in NGO, and also they are just boys and girls, or male and female, 50-50, just 50-50. And then roughly half of them are with master's degrees already, and then others have, of course, diploma from bachelor's degrees. Then overall, JICA is probably one of the very popular institutions in Japan. That is the evidence that people are with a strong sense of commitment to international cooperation. Having those young guys is a pleasure, and also I think this is the evidence that we are not going to a bad way. We are possibly going to a good way.
Thank you very much. I hope both of you, as well as our audience, enjoyed it as much as I did. SPJ will continue this series online for a year. Please find information regarding our next session on our website. And thank you very much again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Bye.